I'm Heidi, 35, a financial analyst who just survived the corporate battle of my life. When our vice president Marcus boasted I own this contract during that $79 million deal signing, he had no idea I'd spent 3 months tracking his deception. The look on his face when the investor asked about those forged initials was worth every sleepless night documenting his fraud. Sometimes standing your ground means watching someone's carefully constructed lie crumble in real time. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button and get ready for the corporate takedown story of the year. My journey to that dramatic boardroom confrontation began long before Marcus showed his true colors. I'd spent 8 years at Tech Venture Partners after graduating with my master's in financial analysis and a minor in contract law from Northwestern. What started as an entry-level position, analyzing investment opportunities, had evolved into a senior role managing our most significant client relationships. I'd earned my reputation through careful analysis and an almost obsessive attention to detail. Tech Venture Partners isn't just any investment firm. We specialize in connecting promising technology startups with serious capital, and with over $2 billion in managed investments, we're considered one of the top 5 tech investment brokers in Chicago. Our glass and steel office overlooking Lake Michigan projects exactly the image our clients expect: sophisticated, cutting-edge, and completely trustworthy. Marcus Reynolds joined the company 4 years ago, recruited from a competitor with promises of fast-track advancement. At 42, he had the polished appearance of someone born into money, but with the hungry eyes of someone who still had something to prove. As vice president of business development, he technically wasn't my direct supervisor, but in the complicated hierarchy of our firm, his position gave him significant influence over which projects received priority and which analysts got assigned to the most career-advancing deals. From day one, Marcus and I had an uneasy professional relationship. He'd smile with perfect white teeth during company meetings while subtly undermining my recommendations. Interesting analysis, Heidi, though. Perhaps a bit conservative for our growth targets, he'd say, making me sound like the office killjoy rather than a prudent analyst. I'd noticed he did this primarily with female colleagues, especially those who didn't defer to his expertise immediately. Jessica Chen was the only person at the office I truly considered a friend rather than just a colleague. As our marketing director, she worked closely with both Marcus and me on client presentations, and she'd witnessed his behavior firsthand. "He's threatened by you," she told me once over lunch. "You've been here longer, the CEO respects your work, and you don't laugh at his jokes." In Marcus's world, that's practically a declaration of war. Our CEO, Richard Thompson, was in his early 60s, and had founded Tech Venture after 30 years in traditional investment banking. He had old-school values about business relationships and personal integrity, which I respected enormously. Richard appreciated my thorough analysis, but was increasingly swayed by Marcus's flashy presentations and aggressive growth projections. The tension between steady growth and explosive expansion played out in nearly every executive meeting. Amanda Pierce, our lead legal counsel, was another key player in our corporate drama. With 15 years of experience in corporate law, she was precise, methodical, and unflappable. She'd shown me the ropes when I first started taking on contract review responsibilities, and I knew she valued ethics above office politics. Our board consisted of 7 members, predominantly older men who'd made their fortunes in various industries, with just 2 women who'd fought their way up through the tech sector's notoriously uneven playing field. They respected solid numbers, but could be dazzled by charismatic presentations. The $79 million deal that would eventually expose Marcus was a funding package for Quantum Nexus, a promising quantum computing startup that had developed a new approach to stable qubits. The investors included several venture capital firms, with Axiom Ventures as the lead. Their representative, Sebastian Warner, was known for his penetrating questions and zero-tolerance policy for anything that felt dishonest. When Richard announced that Marcus would lead the Quantum Nexus project with me, providing financial analysis support, Marcus's smirk told me everything I needed to know about how this arrangement would go. "Looking forward to working together, Heidi," he said with a tone that suggested exactly the opposite. "Your attention to detail will be useful." I had no idea then just how useful that attention to detail would prove to be, or how it would eventually lead to the most dramatic confrontation of my professional career. The Quantum Nexus project started like many others with a flurry of meetings and document exchanges. The $79 million investment would be structured across 3 funding rounds with specific performance benchmarks triggering each new capital infusion. My role was to verify the financial projections, ensure the benchmarks were realistic, and confirm that the contract terms protected our investors while giving Quantum Nexus enough freedom to innovate. Within the first week, I noticed Marcus had scheduled a preliminary term sheet review without including me on the calendar invite. I only learned about it when Jessica mentioned it casually over coffee. "I thought you'd be leading the financial section of the presentation," she said, looking confused, when I clearly had no idea what she was talking about. I showed up anyway, walking into the conference room with my laptop and a confident smile. "Sorry if I missed the updated invitation," I said, taking a seat at the table. Marcus's momentary flash of annoyance confirmed this wasn't an oversight. "Heidi, I didn't think we needed your input at this early stage," he said smoothly. "But since you're here, perhaps you can take notes." Take notes? Like I was an administrative assistant rather than the senior financial analyst assigned to the project. I smiled pleasantly and opened my laptop. "Happy to document everything," I replied, emphasizing the word everything just enough to make him pause. After the meeting, I began comparing the preliminary terms Marcus had presented with the standard templates our firm used. I noticed several subtle modifications that shifted control metrics in ways that would be easy to miss if you weren't specifically looking for them. The changes weren't necessarily problematic on their face, but they weren't standard either. When I emailed Marcus about the discrepancies, his response was dismissive. "These are customized terms for a unique opportunity. Not everything fits in your standard templates, Heidi." 2 days later, a revised draft came through with even more changes, including modified language around the investor oversight provisions. When I pointed this out during the next team meeting, Marcus waved away my concerns. "Heidi is being characteristically cautious," he told the room with a patronizing smile. "But Quantum Nexus needs flexibility to achieve the growth targets we're all excited about. These modifications are industry standard for cutting-edge tech investments." They weren't. I'd reviewed over 200 tech investment contracts during my time at Tech Venture, and these changes were anything but standard. They effectively created blind spots in investor oversight during critical development phases. After the meeting, I approached Marcus directly. "Those provisions would limit our investors' visibility into how their capital is being deployed. That's not protecting our clients." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen carefully. This deal is going to happen with or without your approval. I've worked too hard cultivating this relationship to have you nitpicking it to death. Richard has already expressed enthusiasm for the terms as presented." "Because he's seeing the version you want him to see," I countered, "not the actual implications." Marcus's expression hardened. "Be very careful, Heidi. Being known as the person who killed a $79 million deal won't do your career any favors." That evening, I called Jessica and asked if we could meet for drinks after work. At a small wine bar away from our usual corporate haunts, I explained what I'd noticed. "This doesn't sound like normal contract customization," she agreed, looking troubled. "But why would Marcus push for terms that don't protect our investors? That puts the firm at risk too." "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I'm going to find out." That night, I created a secure folder on my personal drive and began documenting everything: the original templates, Marcus's modified versions, timestamps of meetings, and notes from every interaction. If something wasn't right, I wanted a clear paper trail. The following week, Marcus presented a financial projection update to the executive team. Watching him click through slides of analysis I'd created, but with my name nowhere to be found, I felt my blood pressure rising. He'd taken my conservative growth estimates and inflated them by nearly 20%, making the investment appear even more attractive. When I raised my hand to question the numbers, Richard nodded in my direction. "These projections seem more aggressive than our initial assessment," I said carefully. "I'm concerned they may create unrealistic expectations." "Actually," Marcus responded with practiced ease, "these reflect updated information from Quantum Nexus's CTO that came in after your preliminary analysis. I didn't want to bother you with a complete revision since you've been so busy with other projects." It was a masterful deflection that made him look considerate, while effectively undermining my original work. I noticed several approving nods around the table, including from Richard. Walking back to my office, I felt a cold determination settling in my chest. Something wasn't right, and I refused to be sidelined while Marcus potentially jeopardized not only my reputation, but possibly the entire investment. I would watch, document, and protect the company's interests, regardless of Marcus's games. As the Quantum Nexus deal progressed, Marcus became increasingly bold in his efforts to exclude me. Key meetings were suddenly rescheduled to times when I had standing commitments with other clients. Draft documents arrived in my inbox hours before decision deadlines, giving me minimal time to review thousands of words of dense legal and financial text. When I managed to provide comments anyway, they were frequently overlooked in the final versions. Working late one evening, I decided to compare all versions of the contract that had circulated over the previous month. Starting with the original template and methodically reviewing each subsequent draft, I created a changelog that highlighted every modification. Most changes were innocuous enough individually, but collectively they told a disturbing story. The most significant alterations centered around three areas: the milestone requirements for releasing additional funding, tranches the reporting requirements for how Quantum Nexus used investor funds, and the structure of the preferred equity conversion. In each case, the changes reduced transparency and investor protection while increasing flexibility for the startup's executive team. What truly alarmed me was discovering that many of these changes had been slipped in between versions without being highlighted or flagged for review. In corporate contract negotiations, this was the equivalent of changing the price tag after someone agreed to buy. The next morning, I arrived early and searched through our email server for all correspondence between Marcus and Quantum Nexus. Using my senior analyst access permissions, I discovered a series of exchanges that weren't included in our project documentation system. In one email, Marcus wrote to someone named Alexander Griffin. Apparently, Quantum Nexus's CFO adjusted the milestone requirements as discussed. Should give you the breathing room we talked about. Another email referred to our arrangement and mutual benefits beyond the standard relationship. I felt sick to my stomach. This wasn't just about Marcus sidelining me professionally. He appeared to be deliberately structuring the deal to benefit Quantum Nexus at our investors' expense. But why? What was his angle? I printed selected emails and tucked them into a folder just as I heard voices approaching. Marcus appeared in my office doorway with Richard beside him. "Heidi, we've decided to restructure the analysis team for Quantum Nexus," Richard said, looking uncomfortable. "Marcus feels we need fresh eyes on the financial projections, so we're bringing in Bradley from the tech sector team." "Bradley has half my experience with quantum computing investments," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "And I've been working on this deal since inception." "Your thoroughness is appreciated," Marcus interjected smoothly, "but your approach has been overly cautious. We need someone who understands the velocity of the quantum computing market." The implication was clear. I was too slow, too careful, not visionary enough, and Richard was buying it. After they left, I took my folder and went directly to Amanda's office in the legal department. I closed her door and laid out what I'd found. "These are serious concerns," she said after reviewing the documents, her expression grave, "but also difficult to prove as deliberate malfeasance rather than aggressive negotiation. Marcus could claim he's just driving a hard bargain for our company. But the emails suggest he's working with Quantum Nexus against our investors' interests," I argued. Amanda nodded slowly. "Yes, they're suggestive, but not conclusive. We need more direct evidence of what he's getting out of this arrangement. Otherwise, it's your word against his, and he has Richard's ear right now." I left feeling frustrated but more determined than ever. That evening I couldn't focus on anything but the case building in my mind. My apartment, usually my sanctuary with its view of the Chicago skyline, felt like a prison of anxious thoughts. I barely slept, my mind racing through scenarios and consequences. The next morning, Marcus cornered me in the break room when no one else was around. His usual polished veneer had slipped, revealing something harder beneath. "I understand you visited legal yesterday," he said, standing too close. "Let me be perfectly clear. If you continue pushing this paranoid narrative, I'll have no choice but to formally document your insubordination and interference with a critical client relationship." "Is that what you told your contact at Quantum Nexus? That I'm interfering with your relationship?" I asked, refusing to back away. His eyes narrowed. "Careful, Heidi. Your position here isn't as secure as you think. Richard already questions your commitment to growth. Don't force me to make that case more explicitly." Later that day, I approached Richard, hoping to make him understand my concerns. He listened politely, but seemed distracted. "Marcus has kept me updated on the challenges with this deal," he said finally. I understand you have reservations about some terms, but I trust his judgment on this. He has relationships with similar companies and understands what terms are competitive in today's market. I realized then that Marcus had been systematically undermining my credibility for weeks, positioning me as an obstacle rather than a protector of our company's interests. That night I confided in Amanda again, this time about Marcus's veiled threat. Document everything, she advised. Forward relevant emails to your personal account. Keep a log of every interaction. If there's something truly improper happening, we need ironclad evidence. And Heidi, she added with concern in her eyes, watch your back. People who bend rules in business rarely limit their ethical flexibility. The stress began taking a physical toll. I developed insomnia and found myself jumping at small sounds. My usual morning run became my only reliable stress relief, though even that was shadowed by constant mental rehearsals of confrontations and discoveries. Just when I was beginning to doubt myself, I found it. Buried in an appendix of the latest contract draft was an amendment regarding technology licensing that hadn't been in any previous version. It established a separate entity called Nexus Applications Partners that would have exclusive rights to commercialize certain patents resulting from the funded research. This entity wasn't mentioned anywhere else in our documentation. Who owned Nexus Applications Partners? And why was this potentially valuable licensing arrangement being quietly inserted into the contract at this late stage? I had found the thread that, when pulled, might unravel Marcus's entire scheme. With the discovery of Nexus Applications Partners, I knew I needed to investigate methodically. If this was the smoking gun, I suspected I couldn't afford to miss any details or make accusations without absolute certainty. I settled in for what would become weeks of painstaking research and documentation. First, I needed to understand exactly what this mysterious company was and who controlled it. I began by searching public records databases after hours, using my personal laptop rather than company equipment. Nexus Applications Partners had been registered as an LLC in Delaware just 2 months earlier with minimal required disclosures. The listed managing member was another entity called Griffin Holdings. Alexander Griffin, the same name as Quantum Nexus's CFO from the emails I'd discovered. This couldn't be coincidence. I created a detailed timeline correlating the company's formation with key meetings and contract revisions. The pattern was damning. Each major modification to investor protections had occurred shortly after private meetings between Marcus and representatives from Quantum Nexus. Working late became my new normal. After most colleagues had left for the day, I would methodically compare document versions, trace email threads, and build my case. The empty office, with only security guards making occasional rounds, became strangely comforting. No Marcus lurking around corners, no worried glances from colleagues who sensed the tension. One evening, Jessica stopped by my office on her way out, clearly concerned. "You're working too hard," she said, leaning against my doorframe. "This isn't healthy, Heidi." "I'm close to something important," I told her, not wanting to share too much yet. Jessica hesitated, then closed my door and sat down. "People are talking. Marcus has been telling the executive team that you're obsessed with finding problems in his deals because you wanted the VP position he got." My shock must have shown on my face. "I know it's not true," she added quickly, "but he's building a narrative against you. Whatever you're working on, be careful." "I need access to the email exchanges between Marcus and the business development team," I said, making a split-second decision to trust her. "There's something happening with this Quantum Nexus deal that goes beyond normal negotiation." Jessica studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "I'm copied on those because of the marketing materials we create. I'll forward you the threads I have." That night, I received dozens of emails from Jessica. Among them, I found exchanges discussing special arrangement and parallel opportunity structure. Nothing explicitly illegal, but clearly indicating something beyond the standard investment deal was being constructed. With Amanda's guidance, I began researching conflict of interest precedents and fiduciary responsibility requirements. We needed to understand exactly what lines were being crossed legally, not just ethically. If Marcus has a financial interest in this side entity that's receiving valuable patent licensing rights, that's a clear conflict that should have been disclosed, Amanda explained during one of our private meetings. Especially if he's structuring the main investment contract to benefit that entity. "How do we prove his connection to Nexus Applications Partners?" I asked. "That's the challenge," she admitted. These structures are designed to obscure ownership, but sometimes people get sloppy with details when they think no one's looking. Taking her cue, I began examining the document properties of contract drafts, checking metadata and revision histories. In a previous version that had been converted from Word to PDF, I found revision tracking information that had not been properly removed. Among the tracked changes was a comment from Marcus to someone named AG, asking if the ownership percentages in a particular section were acceptable to our side. Our side. Not the company's side, but our side. It was subtle but telling. The next breakthrough came when Jessica discovered a presentation in our marketing archives that had been created for an internal discussion about Quantum Nexus. On slide 17, there was a small organizational chart showing anticipated technology commercialization flow, Nexus applications. Partners appeared as a box, receiving patent licenses, with a dotted line connecting it to another box, labeled Strategic Partners M.R.A.G. et al. M.R. Marcus Reynolds, A.G. Alexander Griffin, there it was. I was compiling these findings when I nearly had a heart attack. Marcus walked into my office unannounced at 8:30 in the evening, finding me surrounded by contract drafts and notes. "Working late again, Heidi?" he asked, his tone conversational, but his eyes sharp as they scanned my desk. I casually placed a folder over my notes, just being thorough. "The board presentation is next week." "Admirable dedication," he said, leaning against my doorframe. "Though I'm concerned you're fixating on hypothetical problems rather than supporting the positive aspects of this investment. Richard mentioned you've been asking about some very specific contract clauses." "Just doing my due diligence," I replied, maintaining eye contact despite my pounding heart. After he left, I packed everything important into my bag and took it home. The next morning, I requested a secure file from IT, something I rarely did, and explained I needed it for sensitive financial projections. Once granted, I uploaded all my evidence organized chronologically with clear annotations. My most significant discovery came just 2 days before the board meeting. I was reviewing the final signature pages prepared for the contract when I noticed something odd about the initials required on each page. The signatory for Nexus Applications Partners was listed as M.R. Managing Partner, but in the actual initial line, the format was subtly different from every other signature line. It looked pre-filled. I pulled out earlier drafts and confirmed my suspicion. The signature page had been prepared with those specific initials already in place, formatted to look like a blank line but actually containing faint pre-printed letters. It was designed to be missed in a cursory review, allowing Marcus to claim later that someone else had signed who coincidentally had the same initials. It was clever, subtle, and absolutely damning. I immediately called Amanda and asked her to meet me away from the office. At a quiet cafe 3 blocks from our building, I showed her what I'd found. "This is it," she said, examining the signature pages with narrowed eyes. "This isn't just poor judgment or aggressive negotiation. This is deliberate deception." "How do we handle the board meeting?" I asked. Amanda thought carefully. "We need to let events unfold naturally until there's no question about intent. If we show our hand too early, he'll have an explanation prepared. Let him present as planned, but be ready with these documents, especially the signature page issue." We spent hours planning exactly how to approach the meeting, anticipating Marcus's likely responses and how to counter them. By the time we finished, I felt simultaneously exhausted and energized. After weeks of investigation, I finally had concrete evidence of Marcus's scheme and a plan to expose it. With the board meeting scheduled for Thursday morning, I had just 48 hours to finalize my strategy. This wasn't just about exposing Marcus's deception. It was about doing so in a way that protected the company, preserved the legitimate aspects of the Quantum Nexus deal, and ensured I wasn't dismissed as merely disgruntled or obstructionist. Amanda and I met again on Wednesday afternoon to rehearse our approach. We commandeered a small conference room at the far end of the legal department, spreading our documents across the table. "The timing is critical," Amanda emphasized. "If you raise these issues before Marcus has fully presented the contract, he'll adapt his presentation to address them preemptively. But wait too long and the board might feel blindsided or embarrassed that they were about to approve something problematic. So I need to let him present the full contract, including his claims about the signature authority, but intervene before the actual vote," I confirmed. "Exactly. And your tone needs to be professional and fact-based. No accusations about his motives, just clear presentation of the discrepancies you've discovered. Let the evidence speak for itself. We practiced multiple scenarios, with Amanda playing Marcus and board members throwing potential objections and questions at me. How would I respond if Marcus claimed the signature issue was a simple administrative error? What if Richard defended Marcus before even hearing the full explanation? What if the quantum nexus representatives became hostile? By evening, I had a concise presentation prepared with key documents organized for quick reference, and my talking points refined to their essential elements. Amanda had arranged for the company's digital display system to be available for document projection, ostensibly for a last-minute legal review of contract terms. Remember, Amanda said, as we packed up, your professional reputation is on the line. Present with confidence, but without emotion. The facts are on your side. That night in my apartment, I rehearsed again in front of my bathroom mirror, watching my expressions and body language. I needed to project calm authority, not anxiety or vindictiveness. I laid out my outfit for the next day, a navy blue suit that I kept for our most important client meetings with a white blouse and minimal jewelry. Professional, serious, credible. Despite my exhaustive preparation, sleep proved elusive. I lay awake picturing every possible outcome from complete vindication to catastrophic professional humiliation. Around 2 a.m, my phone buzzed with a text message. Good luck trying to derail tomorrow's meeting. Some battles can't be won. Consider your future carefully before proceeding. The number wasn't in my contacts, but the message was clear. Marcus knew I was planning something. My hands trembled slightly as I took a screenshot of the message and emailed it to my personal account, adding it to my evidence file. Instead of intimidating me, the text crystallized my resolve. This wasn't just about questionable business practices anymore. It was about explicit attempts to threaten and silence me. I finally fell asleep around 4, waking up gritty-eyed, but determined when my alarm sounded 3 hours later. As I was applying my makeup, carefully concealing the dark circles under my eyes, my phone rang. It was Jessica. Are you okay? She asked immediately. You look like you've barely slept this week. I'm fine, I assured her, though my voice sounded unconvincing even to me. Just preparing for today. Marcus has been in Richard's office since 7:30, she warned. They're reviewing something together, and Richard looked concerned. A preemptive strike. Marcus was trying to get Richard firmly on his side before the board meeting. Thanks for letting me know, I said, my mind racing to adjust my strategy. Whatever you're planning to do today, I believe in you, Jessica said. You're the most ethical person in that company. Remember that. Her words steadied me. I finished getting ready, triple-checked that I had all my materials, and headed to the office an hour earlier than necessary. I needed to ground myself in the physical space before the emotional storm that was coming. The tech venture boardroom was designed to impress, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan and a massive mahogany table that could seat 20. When I arrived, the catering staff was setting up coffee and pastries along the credenza. I took the opportunity to check the projection system, ensuring it was connected properly, and testing the document camera. Amanda arrived 40 minutes before the scheduled start, looking polished and professional in a charcoal gray suit. Any last-minute developments? She asked quietly. I showed her the text message from the night before. Good, she said, surprising me. That shows consciousness of guilt. Save it for the end if needed. Board members began arriving shortly after, along with Sebastian Warner and 2 other representatives from Axiom Ventures, who would be joining both in person and via video conference. Richard entered with Marcus close behind him, both looking serious but composed. Marcus gave me a brief, cold smile when he saw me already seated at the table. Other key executives filed in, including Jessica, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement as she took her place. The room hummed with the low conversation of people about to conclude a major business transaction, with none aware of the confrontation about to unfold. As I watched Marcus arrange his presentation materials at the head of the table, I felt a moment of doubt. Was I really prepared to disrupt this $79 million deal and potentially damage my company's reputation? Was I willing to risk my entire career on my conviction that what I'd discovered was not only unethical, but deliberately fraudulent? Then I remembered the text message, the altered contract terms, the hidden ownership structure, the manipulated signature page. This wasn't about me against Marcus. This was about integrity, fiduciary responsibility, and the fundamental trust that made business relationships possible. As Richard called the meeting to order, I took a deep breath, and prepared myself. The next hour would change everything one way or another. "Good morning, everyone." Richard began, his deep voice commanding immediate attention. "Today we're here to finalize the $79 million investment partnership with Quantum Nexus, a groundbreaking opportunity that Marcus has skillfully brought to fruition over the past 3 months." The boardroom held 22 people that morning. Our 7 board members sat along one side of the mahogany table with Richard at the head. 3 executives from Quantum Nexus, including Alexander Griffin, sat opposite them. The representatives from Axiom Ventures and other investor groups were positioned strategically around the room, with 4 additional participants joining via the large video conferencing screen mounted on the wall. I was seated toward the middle of the table with Amanda beside me and Jessica across from us. Marcus stood at the head of the table beside Richard, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked completely at ease, a man about to close his crowning achievement. Before we proceed to the final vote and signatures, Richard continued, "Marcus will provide a summary of the final contract terms and structure. Marcus, the floor is yours." With practiced charisma, Marcus launched into his presentation, walking through the investment structure, the milestone requirements, and the projected returns. His slides were polished, his delivery confident. To anyone not familiar with the original terms and standard practices, everything sounded reasonable and exciting. "This deal represents not just a significant investment opportunity," Marcus said, as he approached the end of his presentation, "but a testament to Tech Ventures' ability to structure sophisticated funding arrangements for REIT, cutting-edge technologies. I've personally overseen every detail of this contract to ensure it protects our investors while giving Quantum Nexus the flexibility they need to innovate." My heart pounded as he gestured to the stack of contracts on the table. The moment was approaching. "As the final step before signatures, I'd like to highlight the unique intellectual property provisions we've structured," Marcus continued. "Given the potentially revolutionary nature of Quantum Nexus's technology, we've established a specialized licensing entity called Nexus Applications Partners to maximize commercialization opportunities for specific patent applications." He clicked to a slide showing a simplified organizational chart notably different from the version Jessica had found, with his initials clearly marked. "This entity will focus exclusively on commercial applications, allowing Quantum Nexus to concentrate on core research and development. It's a win-win structure that I'm particularly proud of engineering." Marcus paused, scanning the room with an expression of satisfaction. "In essence, I own this contract. Every clause, every provision, has been carefully crafted to balance interests and maximize returns. I believe it represents the future of how tech investments should be structured." Those words, "I own this contract," delivered with such smug confidence, sent a chill through me. He really believed he had gotten away with it. Richard nodded approvingly. "Thank you, Marcus. This is indeed impressive work. Before we move to the vote, are there any questions from board members or investor representatives?" Sebastian Warner from Axiom Ventures leaned forward. "I'd like clarification on the governance of Nexus Applications Partners. Who controls that entity, and what's the decision-making process for which patents get licensed to it?" Marcus smiled smoothly. "The entity has independent management with deep commercialization experience. Quantum Nexus maintains oversight rights, and all licensing decisions require mutual agreement. The structure ensures specialized expertise without creating conflicts." It was a masterful non-answer that sounded responsive, but revealed nothing about the actual ownership. Sebastian seemed about to press further when I caught Amanda's slight nod. It was time. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I believe there's a critical aspect of this arrangement that requires clarification before we proceed to voting." Richard looked surprised, while Marcus's expression flickered briefly with something harder before settling back into professional concern. "Heidi, we're in the final approval stage," Richard said, his tone suggesting this wasn't the time for last-minute questions. "If you had concerns, they should have been raised earlier in the process." "I understand, Richard," I replied, maintaining eye contact. "But I've identified serious discrepancies that the board should be aware of before making their decision. With Amanda's assistance, I'd like to project some documents for everyone's review." Before Richard could object, Amanda had already activated the document camera. "As legal counsel, I believe this information is material to the board's fiduciary responsibilities," she added, her calm professionalism making it difficult for Richard to dismiss the interruption. Marcus stepped forward, his smile now brittle. "Richard, this is exactly the kind of disruptive behavior I mentioned. Heidi has repeatedly tried to undermine this deal due to her discomfort with innovative structures. Perhaps we should take any concerns offline after the board has voted." Sebastian Warner's voice cut through the tension. "I'd like to see whatever documents are being referenced, as lead investor Axiom has a right to any material information before voting." With that intervention, Richard had little choice but to allow me to proceed. "Briefly, Heidi, the board's time is valuable." I nodded and placed the first document under the camera, the original contract template, with standard investor protections highlighted. "This was our starting point 3 months ago," I explained, then switched to a later version. "These provisions were systematically modified through subsequent drafts, reducing transparency and oversight in key areas." I methodically walked through the changes, keeping my explanation factual and concise. The board members leaned forward, expressions growing more concerned as the pattern became evident. Marcus attempted to interject. "These modifications reflect the unique nature of quantum technology development. Standard templates don't always—" "Please let me finish," I said, firmly, surprising myself with my assertiveness. "The most concerning issue involves the Nexus Applications Partners entity that Marcus just described as having independent management." I placed the organizational chart Jessica had discovered under the camera, the one showing the connection between Nexus Applications Partners and MRAG. This internal document clearly shows that Nexus Applications Partners is controlled by individuals with the initials MR and AG, which correspond to Marcus Reynolds and Alexander Griffin, Quantum Nexus's CFO. The room went completely silent. Alexander Griffin shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Marcus's face flushed red. "This is a misinterpretation of a draft document," Marcus said quickly. "That chart was never finalized. The current structure has completely independent governance." "Then let's examine the actual contract," I replied, maintaining my composure despite my racing heart. "Amanda, could you please project the signature page for Section 12, which governs the patent licensing provisions?" Amanda displayed the page, zooming in on the signature line for Nexus Applications Partners, where MR Managing Partner was indicated. "You'll notice that unlike every other signature line in this contract, this one has pre-formatted initials," I explained. "It was designed to appear as a blank line during reviews, but already contains Marcus Reynolds' initials embedded in the document." Sebastian Warner, who had been watching intently from the lead investor's position, unmuted his microphone on the video call. His voice filled the room, calm but penetrating. "Mr. Reynolds, I'd like you to look closer at the grantor's initials on that page. Are you confirming that is you?" The question hung in the air, devastating in its simplicity. Marcus stood frozen, his confident smile completely dissolved. In that moment, everyone could see the truth. There appears to be a formatting issue with that page," Marcus stammered. "This is clearly a technical error in document preparation." Richard, who had been watching the unfolding situation with growing alarm, turned to Marcus. "Are you involved with Nexus Applications Partners, Marcus, yes or no?" The direct question from his mentor seemed to throw Marcus off balance. "It's a complex arrangement designed to maximize value for all parties," he began, his usual eloquence failing him. "I have an advisory role that would only activate after the investment proved successful." "That's not what these documents indicate," I said, placing the email exchanges on the camera. "These communications suggest you've been working with Mr. Griffin to structure this deal specifically to benefit your joint side venture, using your position at Tech Venture to direct valuable patent rights to an entity you secretly control." Alexander Griffin suddenly stood up. "I think we should pause this meeting and consult with our respective counsel before proceeding further." The chairman of our board, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. "I believe that's wise. This meeting is suspended pending a full investigation of the allegations presented. No contracts will be signed today." Marcus made one last desperate attempt. "This is a misunderstanding being weaponized by someone who's been hostile to this deal from the beginning. Heidi has consistently tried to obstruct progress because she resents my position in the company." I placed my final piece of evidence on the camera, the threatening text message from the previous night. "I received this anonymous message after hours yesterday. While I can't prove who sent it, the timing and content are telling." The board chairman's expression hardened as he read the message. Mr. Reynolds, please collect your things and wait in my office. Miss Pierce, as legal counsel, please secure all contract documents and correspondence related to this deal. Mr. Thompson, I'd like to speak with you privately after this meeting. As the room erupted into tense conversations, Marcus leaned toward me, his voice low and venomous. You've just destroyed months of work and a valuable relationship. I hope you're prepared for the consequences. I met his gaze steadily. I was prepared the moment I found evidence you were betraying our company and our investors. That's the difference between us, Marcus. As he was escorted from the room, the magnitude of what had just happened began to sink in. I had publicly accused a vice president of fraud and self-dealing backed by evidence I'd gathered largely without authorization. Even if I was completely right, my future at Tech Venture hung in the balance. Sebastian Warner approached me as the meeting broke up. That took courage, he said quietly. Axiom values integrity in our partners. Whatever happens next, remember that. Jessica squeezed my arm as she passed. You did it, she whispered. Now, brace for impact. The 48 hours following the board meeting were simultaneously the most stressful and vindicating of my professional life. I was asked to work from home while an independent investigation was conducted, a requirement that felt punitive, despite assurances it was standard procedure. My access to company systems was restricted, and I found myself constantly checking my phone for updates that rarely came. On Friday afternoon, I received a call from Richard asking me to come to the office on Monday morning for a meeting with him and the board chairman. The weekend stretched endlessly, filled with anxiety and second-guessing. Had I handled things correctly? Was my evidence as conclusive as I believed? Would I still have a job on Monday? When Monday arrived, I dressed with particular care, armoring myself with my best suit and a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Walking through the office to Richard's corner suite, I noticed colleagues watching me with expressions ranging from curiosity to admiration to discomfort. News had clearly spread. To my surprise, the meeting included not just Richard and the chairman, but also Sebastian Warner and 2 members of the legal team, including Amanda. Everyone's expressions were unreadable as I took my seat. Heidi, the chairman began. The independent investigation has confirmed your findings regarding Marcus Reynolds' undisclosed interest in Nexus Applications Partners and his deliberate manipulation of the contract terms. I exhaled slowly, tension draining from my shoulders. Further investigation has revealed that this wasn't an isolated incident, he continued. Marcus had similar arrangements with 2 previous deals, though on a smaller scale. He's been terminated for cause effective immediately. Richard looked both angry and embarrassed. I want to apologize personally, he said. I should have listened more carefully to your concerns earlier in the process. Marcus exploited my trust and nearly compromised the integrity of this firm. What happens with the Quantum Nexus deal, I asked. Sebastian answered this question. We still believe in the technology and the core team who appear to have been misled by their CFO. Alexander Griffin has resigned and we're restructuring the investment with completely transparent terms. In fact, he added with a slight smile, we'd like you to lead the financial structuring of the revised deal if you're willing. The chairman nodded, which brings us to the next item. The board has unanimously approved your promotion to Senior Director of Investment Integrity, a new position that will report directly to the board. We believe your attention to detail and ethical commitment are exactly what this company needs to prevent similar situations in the future. I was speechless, the vindication even more complete than I had dared hope for. In the weeks that followed, I led the restructuring of the Quantum Nexus investment, now a transparent $79 million deal with proper oversight provisions and no hidden beneficiaries. The technology remained promising, and without the corrupt elements, the partnership flourished. Tech Venture implemented new contract review procedures based on my recommendations, creating multiple independent checkpoints to prevent manipulation. Every investment now required sign-off from at least 3 senior team members, with all changes between versions clearly tracked and explained. Richard and I rebuilt our professional relationship on stronger foundations. You showed me what real loyalty to this company looks like, he told me, during a quiet moment after a successful closing. Not saying what I wanted to hear, but fighting for what was right. Jessica was promoted to Chief Marketing Officer and became my closest ally in the executive team. Remember when you were hiding documents from Marcus in your office that night? She laughed over celebration drinks. I knew whatever you were working on was important, but I never imagined it would reshape the entire company. Amanda and I developed a professional development series on ethics in investment banking that became mandatory for all employees. The best protection against corruption isn't just policies she would explain in these sessions. It's people willing to ask uncomfortable questions and stand their ground. As for Marcus, I learned that he faced civil penalties from the Securities and Exchange Commission and would be barred from the securities industry. The justice felt appropriate without being vindictive. The personal growth from this ordeal was perhaps the most meaningful outcome. I had discovered reserves of courage and conviction I hadn't known I possessed. The anxiety and self-doubt that had plagued me throughout the investigation transformed into a quiet confidence in my own moral compass. In the months that followed, I received calls from colleagues at other firms facing similar ethical dilemmas. I always took those calls remembering how isolated I had felt during my own investigation. Sometimes the most important support is simply knowing you're not alone in trying to do the right thing. 1 year after the confrontation, I was invited to speak at an industry conference about investment ethics. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of finance professionals, I shared the lessons I had learned. Documentation is your strongest ally. Thorough records transform suspicions into evidence and allegations into facts. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even when others dismiss your concerns. Expertise isn't just about knowing industry standards, it's about recognizing when they're being violated. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. I was terrified throughout this entire process, but each step forward made the next one possible. And finally, integrity isn't just a personal virtue, it's a professional responsibility. When we sign our names to documents, when we represent our companies, when we manage other people's money, we're making promises that matter. Keeping those promises isn't just right, it's the foundation of every legitimate business relationship. The standing ovation that followed wasn't for me personally, I realized, but for the principles I had defended. In that moment, I understood that the true measure of success isn't just the deals we close or the money we make, but the integrity we maintain along the way. My confrontation with Marcus had never really been about exposing one person's deception. It was about protecting a system of trust that makes business possible where contracts mean what they say and people stand behind their words. It was about creating an environment where doing the right thing isn't just permitted but expected and valued. As I look back on that pivotal board meeting, when Marcus's carefully constructed lie crumbled before everyone's eyes, I'm reminded that truth has a power that deception can never match. His "I own this contract" boast collapsed because no one can truly own what isn't rightfully theirs. Have you ever had to stand up against someone who seemed to hold all the power? How did you find the courage to speak truth even when it was difficult? Share your experience in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Sometimes the stories that matter most are the ones where ordinary people find extraordinary courage to defend what's right. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, integrity isn't just how you behave when everyone is watching, it's who you are when you think no one is.